Now I would like Mauri to introduce our special guests.
Sure. So tonight's show is called Illusion, Coma, Pimp, and Circumstance. It is exploring Prince as a brand and the marketing genius that he was. So we have some amazing guests with us tonight. Joining us are Allen Beaulieu, who is Prince's photographer from early on. Many of us know him from his working with Dirty Mind and Controversy in 1999. We also have Sam Jennings here, and Sam was one of the Webby Award winners from the MPG Music Club. I have my $80 t-shirt, Sam. It was great while it lasted. I love the MPG Music Club. And we have Afshin Shahidi, who's a photographer and filmmaker and began collaborating with Prince in the 90s. And last but certainly not least, we have Troy Gua, who is an awesome artist extraordinaire who's going to be sharing his work with us, as all the artists will be tonight. So the Prince paradigm, the purple paradigm, began as a conversation between Robin and I, we've been friends for a really long time. We met waiting online for Prince tickets, actually, in the early 90s. Yes, going to Act One at Radio City Music Hall. And when Prince passed away, of course, like most people on this call, we were very devastated. And it took us a while to get it together, but we wanted to make sure that we were preservers of the legacy in our own right, and really giving the fams, as Prince liked to call us, not fans, an opportunity to lean into the world that he had so created for us and to have voice in that world. And we wanted to create a forum, a platform basically, where the fams can come and engage in that world. So the Purple Paradigm is that platform, and we're so grateful to have you all join us. This is our third episode, and we're going to keep on going hard with this. Shout out to DJ Razz Beret, aka Caterina Pierre, for blessing us with some tunes coming in. And Robin is going to set us off with the mission statement. For every episode, we have a mission behind what we're looking at in terms of the preservation of legacy. So Robin's going to hit us off with a mission statement around branding and marketing.
Hello, and welcome to the Purple Paradigm. My name is Robin Chamaze, and I'm here to present you with our mission statement for episode 3, entitled Illusion, Coma, Pimp, and Circumstance. Prince as Brand. On this episode, we spoke about Prince as a branding and marketing genius. So, what do we mean by the term brand? What does this have to do with Prince, and why is this important? By definition, the word brand in the world of marketing would typically be described as a name, symbol, or design that represents or distinguishes a product or a company, particularly from its competitors. So when you think of Prince, besides his musicianship, obviously, what immediately comes to your mind? For me, the strongest representation of Prince is a symbol. And the symbol basically evolved with him. I remember drawing that first version of that symbol on my notebook when I was a teenager. Today, when you see the final version, you think of him. That is not an accident. Mitch Monson, co-designer of the symbol, said, "When you go to Paisley Park and see all of the memorials, you see the symbol everywhere. How can an artist not be inspired by that? We might possibly see a current or future artist that is inspired and adopts this sort of representation. If you can find that one symbol that represents who and what you are and what you believe in, it can translate in any country and in any language. Plus, I believe people are more inspired by a symbol than by a word." Think about the genius behind this. Prince is the first and only artist, at least that I know of, that basically gave himself a logo. And of course, purple. He is also the only music artist that I know of that was given his own shade of color by Pantone. The color is represented by Prince's symbol, and the color is called Love Symbol Number 2. Third for me would be his shoes, because when you see a pair of his shoes, you know who wore them. Next would be his guitars. When I'm 99 years old and you show me a pic of Prince's infamous Honor Telecaster or one of his cloud guitars, I may not remember who I am, but I definitely will remember who played those guitars. So now let's talk about the term marketing. What's the difference between branding and marketing? Well, marketing is the practice of actively refining your brand and bringing it to the masses in ways that are memorable, meaningful, and keeps them wanting more. If we take these definitions and apply them to Prince, it's fair to say that he was as much a branding and marketing genius as he was a musical genius. For Prince, a key component in how he marketed himself, beyond his iconic performances, was his very image. Prince equaled imagery. Prince was always willing to go to the next level in how he presented himself to you. Now, I know it's hard to narrow it down, but when you think of Prince's most memorable video or performance, what do you think of? And by that I mean, which are the ones that all of your friends were talking about at school or work the next day after they premiered? What impression were you left with after you watched them? Well, this is my short list of definable moments that made an indelible impression on me through the years. American Bandstand. For many, this was the first real introduction to Prince, and during the interview portion, he remained mostly silent. Basically, he snubbed Dick Clark. A very bold move, and he does it while wearing a rose gold blouse, gold spandex pants, his hair in a blowout, and blinking those incredible eyes of his. America, Dick, and the bandstand did not know what hit them. Next would be Controversy. I was all in on this song. I remember it resonating with me because he recites the Lord's Prayer, and I went to Catholic school and pretty much had to say it all the time. In the video, he's singing and dancing around in what appears to be some type of pseudo-church. He's wearing a black trench coat, white church lady blouse with a skinny tie wrapped around his neck, and oh my! A minute or so in, he reveals a flash of high thigh meat. This was around the time when I started to take notice of him. He was a little scary, but I was intrigued. I was 11. Next would have to be When Doves Cry. When the door opens and he crawls out of the bathtub and reaches out, I was only 13, but my thought was, yeah, I'm going with you, Prince. I literally needed to know everything that there was to know about this fascinating artist after I saw this vision. And even though he was naked, supposedly, my 13-year-old brain didn't process it as cheesy or sleazy. I actually saw him as innocent and vulnerable. He reaches out to take us on a journey with him. Next would be the VMA performance of Get Off, with his booty out pants. Now, okay, this one was just about Prince showing us his bum, but the lace and the tailoring on that suit is just impeccable. Shout out to Stacia Lang. I mean, look at that suit. Next would be the Super Bowl. I was a grown-ass woman of 36, had seen him countless times in concert, but yet here I was blown again away. He literally conjured purple rain and then this imagery. Now, I could go on. I mean, I can't make a sufficient list because there are so many moments, but you get what I'm saying. The point here is that Prince always kept you talking, and I'm here to make the case that all of these legendary moments were evidence of his marketing genius. To always get inside your head a little bit, even if you didn't totally get it. For those who took the trip beyond the surface conversation, we knew there was an often bigger picture and a deeper story there. But even those who didn't really get it, they were still talking the next day. Next would be fashion. Now, I briefly mentioned his clothing, and I'll do a more expansive analysis of Prince and fashion in a future episode, but I need to jump back to fashion here for just a moment. Fashion is as much a part of Prince's brand as his symbol. Many, many times over the years, I have heard people say things like, only Prince would wear that, referring to his clothing and his fashion sensibilities. Think about this. If Prince wore it, he pretty much took ownership of the style, and not many other people, artists, anyone, would dare to go there. Now that's a fashion icon and a branding mastermind. Last, I want to touch on the storylines that often accompanied the music. Most albums had a storyline, some more defined than others. Take, for instance, the Symbol album. The storyline around it was magical, an escapist fantasy love story about a wild musician who falls in love with a young virginal Egyptian princess named Maite. There was something about 3 chains of gold and some men who killed her father, which never really made sense to me, but the rest of the story really swept me away. I almost felt like years later, Prince let us know about a marketing hitch. With the song Greatest Romance That's Ever Been Sold, I kind of always felt like he was telling us that it was a marketing ploy. I don't know. I've just always had the feeling that Greatest Romance was about that story in the Symbol album, especially since it was the most expansive storyline since his actual movies. Who knows for sure if that was the reference, but it definitely got me thinking, and it still does. So, why is all of this important? Because I believe everything Prince did was intentional. The objective of the artist should be to move people and leave them inspired. But with Prince, there was always so much more. At the beginning of the song Artificial Cage, Prince says, "Welcome home, class," and hopefully you were paying attention. Prince basically confirmed for us that he was literally taking us to school with every step he made. There are significant tools, techniques, and precedents Prince set down for artists young and old to study, learn from, and utilize. I believe among his greatest lessons, one of the most significant was how to get inside people's heads and hearts, occupy space in ways that are memorable, meaningful, and keeps them wanting more. Thank you. So next, I wanted to just introduce our special guests one more time and just give you a little bit more background around them and their accomplishments. First, we had Allen Beaulieu. Allen worked with Prince from the late 1970s into the early 80s, capturing his progression from rising star to legendary status. Allen is also responsible for creating iconic album cover images and promotional photos for Prince during the groundbreaking Dirty Mind controversy 1999 eras, while also capturing live performances on tour with Prince. If you don't have his book, Prince Before the Rain, please go get it. Next, we have Sam Jennings. Sam was co-founder of the Webby Award-winning NPG Music Club, art director for multiple Prince albums including 3121, Planet Earth, and the recent One Night Alone collection released by Sony and the Prince Estate. Next is Afshin Shahidi. Afshin is a photographer and filmmaker who began collaborating with Prince in 1993. He started as a camera assistant on video sets and eventually became Prince's cinematographer and still photographer until the late 2000s. He also has an awesome book out called Prince, A Private View, and go get that one as well if you don't have it. It's great. And speaking of 3121 and Planet Earth, Afshin took the photos that became the album cover art that Sam created. Last but certainly not least, we have Troy Gua. Born and raised in Seattle, Troy Gua is a self-taught visual artist who grew up in the 70s and 80s America with images and icons that have been imprinted into his psyche, fueling a prolific output of pop-infused conceptual work in a diverse range of media, marrying popular to contemporary with wit and a crisp design aesthetic. He considers Prince to be his most profound influence and inspiration. With his Le Petit Prince pieces, he has wonderfully recreated some amazing moments in Prince's career in photos inspired by our guest photographers. I asked Troy to speak to us about Prince's influence on him as a visual artist, and he was kind enough to create a video that speaks to that influence and gives us a little more insight on Troy and his work. So here it is. Check it out.
Hi, I'm Troy Gua, visual artist and designer from Seattle, Washington. And Purple Paradigm invited me to participate in this episode to talk about how Prince has influenced my work as a visual artist. And that's a long answer. So in order to make sure I don't forget any crucial points I want to make, I'm presenting this video to you. But before we get started, I want to acknowledge and thank the other guests, Allen, Afshin, and Sam, whose work with Prince has absolutely directly inspired my work about Prince. And I am just honored and grateful to have been invited to participate in this episode with you guys. Thanks to Purple Paradigm and everybody involved. Now, without getting too autobiographical, I think I was born with a creative streak and I need to express myself as what we categorize as visual art. And I was always the art kid growing up in all the classes, and I took the role on with pride and relished it. And my dad would bring home extra paper from the office, and I would see that as an endless supply of possibilities. But it wasn't until I was 13 and discovered Prince that I began to realize and think about the way I wanted to be an artist. Today, I'm mostly known in the Prince fam community for the work I do that features Prince as the subject, naturally. But it's not just about the tribute work for me that relates to Prince. It's how he conducted himself as an artist. That's the true inspiration for me. There are several aspects of Prince's artistry and personal brand, so to speak, that lead me to draw on him for inspiration for my own. Work ethic. Now, my folks were hard workers with great work ethic that they instilled in me, from the get-go. But Prince's legendary work ethic went beyond comprehension. And while I wasn't able to build and sustain my creative life as a young man, I always aspired to that level of discipline, even when I didn't have it. I have, though, always worked hard at whatever I have done, and that includes making my own way in the world as a visual artist. Now, I am grateful to have the privilege of being creative for a living, and while I'm no Prince, I pretty much work all the time. I know the only way to get good at something or better at something is to work at it. Prince is the perfect example of that. From everything I've ever heard about him, he was almost cursed with an overactive mind that compelled him to work constantly. He played and played and played the piano until he mastered it as a kid, and then he moved on to the guitar and did the same thing, and so on. And now I'm not trying to measure up to Prince's work ethic because I never could, but he has certainly inspired me to work harder. Prolificy, or making a lot of work. Just because you make a lot of work doesn't mean it's quote unquote good. But if you add in quality with prolificy, then that describes Prince. And Prince oftentimes would create entire songs, masterpieces in one day. And that's another high level mark that I've transferred to my own creative life. I do make a lot of work, and I'm continuously working on the LPP project, posting a new LPP image every week. And that's, aside from the other work I make. My hope is that the quality is there, and I think it is. Eclecticism. I think the moment I realized you didn't have to be one thing as an artist was when Around the World in a Day came out. It blew me away. The music, yes, but the difference from what came before, that's really what got me. After being the biggest thing on the planet, and the planet expecting him to deliver them Purple Rain Part 2, he switched it up and said, nope, and then again and again and again. There have always been artists that perfect their chosen medium and worked it to death. Nothing wrong with that at all. It sounds like death to me, or at least purgatory. And I have several series of bodies of work in media as diverse as the work itself. I have to give credit to Picasso as an influence on my own eclecticism as well. But I think that Prince and Picasso were equals in many ways. So that works for me. It was really, though, Prince's ability to jump from genre to genre and remake himself time and again that always excited me as an artist. And I've always wanted to emulate that. Some may say I'm all over the place with my work, but I say it's better than being stuck in one. I'm optimistic about the thought that a common thread runs through the entirety of my work. And Prince is responsible. He was an idea antenna. In the past few years, I've been learning more and more about how Prince worked with close collaborators and band members through various writings and interviews and books and podcasts and everything I can get my hands on. And one of the greatest takeaways for me is how he was always fully open to accepting ideas and inspirations from those around him. Idea antenna. He would distill those ideas through his own unique creative filter. My subject matter, like my media choice, is fluid and wide in range, and it addresses iconography and identity and referencing contemporary culture and my relationship with it. I watch and look and read, and I take in media like everyone does. And then when inspiration strikes and I feel like I have to say something, I synthesize it into whatever it is I want to say in a visual manifestation. And I feel like that's very akin to what Prince did with his music. I have favorite visual artists that speak to me and have influenced my work for sure. Some more obvious than others, maybe. From Warhol to Koons to Duchamp to Yves Klein to Jasper Johns to Baldessari to Mondrian to Picasso. Pick up a trick here, a kernel there, a color palette here. Definitely informs my work. And I am a human being alive on planet Earth in the United States in the year 2020. And, there's so much input right now that it's kind of hard to discover what it even is that I'm really feeling. But I'm confident that there is some art brewing within. And speaking of confidence, Prince personified it. There was nobody like him. He made sure of that, and he made sure you knew it. His fearlessness and his self-expression was, this is going to sound corny, but intoxicating. It was the single most inspirational aspect of Prince for me since I began following him. Even if I didn't always immediately love what I heard or saw over the decades as a Prince fan, I respected it because he was always the bravest artist that there ever was. Fully committed to his art by any means necessary, and fully confident that what he was presenting you was the next big thing. Most musical artists craft a song over a period of time and make demos. Prince didn't. He went into the studio with the express intent of creating the final product, not to experiment or mess around. And if he was going to record something, it was going to be the thing. I don't really mess around either. I have an idea. It's usually a fully formed object or image in my head, and I go about the work of making it real. The media of choice is whatever best serves the idea, and the methods of fabrication are as wide in scope as the results. Self-taught. Okay, from what I understand, for the most part, Prince was a self-taught musician, taught himself how to play all the instruments, sing, write, and that inspires me to no end. I've taken an art class here and there, but I'm mostly self-taught. Growing up in the 60s or 70s, you had to either take lessons, learn from a mentor, or just put in the time. And Prince put in the time and learned from people like Sonny Thompson and Pepe Willie and his father, John Nelson. It was his passion that ran the machine. Without that, I don't think anything creative is possible. But with Prince, his musical machine ran at such a high level for such a long time that in a way it's intimidating, but it's also super inspiring. In the visual art world, there are no rules, but there surely are unspoken systems in place that can make being an artist without a degree feel like he's in an uphill battle. And that's been both a challenge and a source of fuel for me. Prince broke the rules and forged new ground and showed me that you don't need a degree to make art. And for that lesson, I will be forever grateful. Creation of worlds. Prince created utopian worlds for us to inhabit with his music, and we wanted to live there for sure. And he also created micro-universes with each new album that he would release. And, they'd have theme colors, everything purple until everything but purple, to black and white, to peach and black, and on and on. And, oh, how I miss that feeling, right? And you know the one. What I'm getting at is the concept of the album, of pieces working together to tell the story of a whole. That idea I've borrowed several times in shows, mostly of sculpture built around themes or statements that I feel strongly about making. And that's what I really love to do, and I wish I could do more of it. My themes aren't necessarily utopian ones, though. In fact, I guess my vision is a little darker and maybe more dystopian warnings and arty snark than utopian. But the album concept is there, and again, because Prince. He said that his songs were like children. That's kind of how I feel about my work. And it's also a reach, it's, at immortality in making art. Yeah. Prince will always be forever. His work is as immortal as it gets. And I can only hope that folks will continue to appreciate and enjoy what I leave behind when I'm gone. There you go. So many ways that Prince has and will continue to shape my creativity. I will be forever grateful to him for his infinite inspiration. Thank you, Prince. Thank you for watching. Be well. Prince forever.
Troy Gua, I have enjoyed your work so much. And we have a few questions for you, Troy. And of course, fam, please join in the chat if you have questions. We're going to start with Troy first. I really loved your breakdown and how you should put that in an article, man. That was great. The breakdown of how Prince, influenced you. And I'm really curious about LPP. Like, where did you come up with this? And every time I see it, right, the first thing that comes to my mind is, how did he get the clothes and the environment like so perfect? Like you every time I see it, I'm always in awe of like, how does he do this like to perfection? And so I know we got to hear how Prince influenced you, but could you talk about LPP a little bit What made you go, you know what, I want to create this piece, and then I got to get the clothing and the environment and the lighting. I got to get those secrets.
It has been an evolving project over, it's been like almost 9 years now. And initially, it was just kind of a way of making myself happy at the end of the year. I was just making a little prints for myself, you know? It's like I had it in my mind for a few years. I, as a kid, was like fascinated by Jerry Anderson's movies like Thunderbirds Are Go, and Captain Scarlet, and they're called Super Marionation. And they were these oversized heads on these marionettes that, you know, they moved and talked and blinked, and they had this really weird, surreal quality to them that I just thought was, I don't know, I was fascinated by it. So then Team America comes along when I'm an adult, and you know, I was like addicted to that movie. I went and saw it like 6 times in a row. Like I was super into it. So I was like, I need to make a little prince that kind of can act as a Jerry Anderson marionette. And that's basically how it started. And you know, he didn't have any clothes at first, and I didn't know what I was going to do about that. I didn't know how to sew. I started asking around, and people that were willing to do it kind of wanted a little bit too much. They wanted more money than I was willing to spend on a 1/6 scale Purple Rain outfit. So my wife, Catherine, says, I've got a sewing machine. We can do it. Let's do it. So it started there. And over time, I taught myself how to sew. And then I taught, you know, I'm kind of amazed by what it has become, you know, versus what it started as. It's pretty cool. Yeah, that's how it started.
That's pretty impressive, because I'm always like, it's like perfection though. And I think listening to you talk about how Prince has influenced you, I could see where you would have gotten like the details. It's so detailed. I think that's the uniqueness of it. It's not just like Prince, like this doll, like Prince doll. It's like, there's an understanding about the era, the music, the fashion, the iconicism that's there in the scenes that you create.
It's important.
You know, and
don't you think?
What were you gonna say?
It's important, don't you think? Don't you think the details are really what?
100%.
Yeah, I mean,
100%. And it shows up so powerfully, and it takes you to that moment in time. Like I remember the one with the bathtub and the When Doves Cry. You had the one with him in the bathtub. He's got the scarf around his neck. Mm-hmm. I'm just like it's like, so it's like perfection. So I help clarify.
Wait, I want to just say one thing. I think that is why it's so special to like print, like the real like Prince geeks like us that are just like it is so meaningful, because it's like, oh, he put the scarf. Oh, it's like every time I see Troy usually posts them like once a week, right? A new one. It's like the details, like his eyes, or the way like he has like LPP standing, or the lighting, or just like the little things like the scarf. It's just like, it takes me back to being a 13-year-old, 14-year-old Prince geek in my bedroom, like, oh, Prince. And you think that my friend Rachel once said, or our friend Rachel once said this, like, back then you thought you were the only one who just totally loved and got Prince. Like, nobody understood him like you did. And then you grow up and you're just like, oh my God, everybody, like, there are people who totally get it because he put the scarf a certain way. I just love it. It's like so meaningful. And it just like, I have literally cried a couple of times, Troy, like, you know, like a big
I love that, Robin. And you couldn't have said it, but that's exactly what it does. That's what the project does for me. It takes me back to that, being a 13, 14-year-old kid, you know? Yeah. And that feeling that he gave us.
Yes, the feeling. Yes, I talked about the feeling in the last episode, or the first episode.
And it's like, you know, he talked about these utopian places, but he was the utopian place.
He was the place.
That is true.
And
I never thought about it like that, but that is totally true.
So I want to give 2 of our fams an opportunity to talk to you, Troy. Arlene posted something really beautiful in the chat, as did Mary Lynn. So Arlene, if you want to share with Troy your sentiments about his work, I think it's always great for an artist to hear the impact that they're having on people.
Hey, Troy, how are you?
I'm well, Arlene. Nice to hear you. I know.
Yes, I know. My room is such a mess. I cannot possibly turn on my camera. Yeah, I just really love your LPPs. I mean, as you know, because I've got the calendar and so on. But I just find them incredibly moving. It's that really close observation of everyday life. You know, it just locates Prince in this kind of normal world, and yet it's so exceptional at the same time. It's just so beautiful, and especially during this COVID time, just that minutiae, the attention to detail, and I just love how, you know, he's always kind of on his own, as in so many ways he was, but we all are now in so many ways, and so it's very powerful.
Yeah, he's like the ultimate social distancer.
Kind of, right? At the same time, though, he's so generous in terms of just putting out for us all the time. So
that means a lot. Thank you so much for saying that. That's, you know, and the thing about him being alone, there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one reason is that it's conceptually about Prince's autonomy and his ability to create alone, for one thing, but also,
right.
You know how we've always heard he was like the loneliest soul in the, you know, in a room full of people, and so that's one reason. The practical reason is he worked with way too many people for me to start trying to make little and little.
I thought that might be the case. Also, you've got him locked down so beautifully, all those expressions that, you know, there doesn't need to be anyone else, because in so many ways he's kind of interacting with us as LPP.
Exactly. And sometimes you are, like, for instance, Wendy or
right. Yeah, exactly.
Andre. And so there's that. And yeah,
love it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Arlene. Good to hear from you.
Thanks so much, Arlene. So Mary Lynn, and then we're gonna wrap up with the question piece here. We have some more questions for you though, Troy, with Naomi. So Mary Lynn, you said it evokes a lot of emotion for you.
Who, what?
I don't know if she's on.
There.
Is Mary Lynn there?
She's saying that her mic doesn't work, but that she agrees wholeheartedly with Arlene. She's writing in the chat. Sadly, my mic doesn't work,
Okay.
but she was happy to. And thanks for talking about the LPP and the aloneness of Prince. She's writing in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry to bust in there. I was just trying to.
No, thank you, Kat. That's why you're co-host. Thanks, Kat. So Naomi, you had a question for Troy?
She's muted. You're muted.
Yes.
You're muted.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Good.
Okay, finally I can meet you.
Yeah.
Where's LPP? So my question is, how do you come up the idea for the LPP every week? Do you plan for in advance, or you just come up, oh, today I'm gonna make this one for this Saturday?
I'm really planned out now. I'm about probably 8 weeks out.
Wow.
So I'm working chronologically, right? So we're working through his life now, and I'm at the 83, 84 mark. Originally, when I first went through the loop of the scope of his life, like the first time, I was doing like 3, 4, 5 images per year. I was capturing each year with 3 or 4 or 5 images. This time, I'm like really like going slow, and and I'm just doing however many it feels right. Like I'm just gonna do. Now it's telling his story. Now I'm implementing other people's input from all the sources that are available now, and I'm telling his story through their words, but also through moments that I have wondered about or thought about or imagined, you know, like, okay, so Prince is on a motorcycle, but there's a camera over here, right? So what does it look like from the camera angle? And what if we put the camera So, you know, it's just looking at things from a different perspective that's really interesting to me too, and it's fun. So that's kind of, you know, I'm reading all the books that everyone's putting out and listening to all the podcasts and you know, just soaking it in and using it as wonderful fuel.
Oh, yes. Yes. I love it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi.
We found
Thanks,
out
Naomi.
something. We found out something cool, Troy, on the last episode, which was that Prince made a drawing of what he imagined Paisley Park would be when he was like in a 7th or 8th grade, which I had never known, and I had done a lot of work on Paisley. So, like, once all the stories come out, you might even have to backtrack and go back to little Petit Prince as a child, and all like being in school and being on the basketball team and sitting on the floor in Andre's house and drawing out a little mini Paisley Park, because the more people tell their stories, the more we learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I actually did go back. So what happened was I was working through his career and got up to 2016 and didn't know what to do. So I decided to time loop him back to the 70s. So I actually did kind of start with as a younger Prince. But again, like as this goes on, who knows how long I'm going to be doing it, how long I'm going to be here. But I'm going to keep going for as long as I can. And I will probably at some point start the loop up again.
Love it. I think it's definitely wanted and needed, Troy. If you look in the chat, you can see that people are loving on you and this work. So one of the more controversial questions we had for you was around Prince's sentiment around LPP.
Yeah.
I remember hearing there was some pushback from him around it. Did you ever get to talk to Prince about it, or did you hear from his people about it and their sentiments of what LPP was for them? Or
I only got a email and a letter, and it was just a standard cease and desist. And it was based on the sale of merchandise. It really had nothing to do with LPP himself, or the project, or my, you know, artistry or anything like that. And bear in mind, this is 2012, so that was an entirely separate project to me, as compared to what it is now.
Got it.
Totally different. But what that was all about was the sale of merchandise that used his, you know, Le Petit Prince. That had things that said Prince on it, and there was questionable use of the symbol. And that's basically what it boils down to. And I never heard Prince's sentiment. I don't know either way whether he liked it or didn't like it. And again, at this point, it's not something I want to attach to it, because it's a different project now than it was then.
No, and definitely valued. Thanks for clearing that up. So please discuss your other artwork. So outside of LPP, you're not just this artist who makes LPP.
No,
There's
that
other
was
things
actually
going on.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question before we move past LPP?
Oh, please.
Sorry. First of all, I feel like an underachiever because that video was great. Thanks for doing that video right at the top. That was fantastic, and it's great to actually meet you because I've been a fan of the work. Okay, back to LPP. How many do you have? How many little Princes do you actually have? Do you manipulate the same one for different things, or do you have a few of them?
So the first iteration of the project from like 2011 to like 2013, there was just one head and one body.
Okay.
And I did all the photos, and just, you know, changing the angles, you get a different looking
figure.
Yeah. Now there's about 6 heads, and I've got probably 5 bodies, and they're all kind of circulating. Cool. And
very cool. I always wondered, because they all look really unique, and I'm like, man, he's making a new Prince every single time, because they do feel really individual. So that's awesome.
Well, that's cool to hear. Yeah, a lot of that's the first question is like, you know, how many are there? It's like, it's not an art. And I wish there was. That would be cool. But
that would be pretty neat.
And
Okay,
thank you
cool.
for the compliment, Mr. Shahidi. You know,
Yeah, of course.
inspiration to me. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mauri, sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. You know, I'm always. Oh,
I have a question. I have one question.
Yeah, I have a question too, you know, but go ahead.
Okay,
Please.
I'm sorry. I know we're trying to move on, and I am the one who's always the like, we have to be tighter on time. But so this just makes me wonder. So you have more than one. Do you have like a mold or like? I mean, I know you probably don't want to give away like how you actually make it, but now I'm curious, like, how do you make it?
Okay, so I did make a mold from the first head, from the first face. So I do start there with I use polymer clay. It's Sculpey.
Okay.
And it's baked. You know, you bake it in the oven. So I start with that, and then it's like, okay, what's the expression going to be? What's his look? So that's where the trickery comes in. I see the first one is like so magic. It's almost magical to me too, because like when I made it and I looked at him, it's like he's alive. It was crazy to me.
Wow.
And it still is. And I feel like I don't know that I could really replicate that. I know I probably could, but it scares me to try. So I made a mold of that face.
Wow.
You know, I painted.
Awesome. That is so awesome. Okay, now I'm very sorry.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, I'm just joking. You know, Troy, I love listening to you respond. You know, this is our third episode of the show, and I have the question for our other guests as well. But did you know that you're having this kind of impact? Like, or when you hear that you're having this kind of impact, like people are crying, people are connecting into.
It really does. It's. I don't know that I really have taken on the impact. Really, I kind of maybe I brush it off a little bit because it's like it's heavy. I love it and it means so much to me, and I do appreciate it. But sometimes I make light of it, and I know it's heavy because it's heavy for me.
Yeah.
And
art, whether art imitates life or the other way around of life imitating art, I think that, artists don't always realize, and that's why another reason why I wanted to do this show, while it's bringing us together as Prince, the idea that each of you, all our guests, hold their own particular artistry. And we also wanted an opportunity within the paradigm to share and lift that, right? Because you can get lost behind somebody as, extraordinary and big as Prince. And the reality is that we're all extraordinary and big in our own way. And giving folks an opportunity to share and showcase that. So Troy, my last question was though around your current work, your other pieces of art that you do and engage in. How could we see? Is there anything you could put in the chat that we can keep in contact with you so we can see the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think Caterina was cool enough to put a link in there early on.
Okay, awesome.
But a lot of my work is, I think, speaks to current social, what we're all going through. And what I'm trying right now to do is figure out what it is, how to say what it is I want to say. So I mostly, this past year in quarantine has been a lot about LPP, because I know for sure that that's going to make me feel good. And that's for sure going to escape from the reality of what we're dealing with in the world, right? But I've got a series that's very commercial that I love, that I've been working on for over 10 years, that actually kind of pays the bills. It's called Pop Hybrids, and there's over 100 of them now. And I sell them at a couple of galleries, and it's been kind of a weird situation these past few months because galleries aren't really open.
Right.
So I'm super thankful to my Patreon members, my Club LPP folks, because they're with me every month, and it's keeps me going.
Thank you for that. So Kat did put in www.troygua.com. So thank you, Troy. And of course, you're welcome, Troy, to join into the conversation as we move forward. But it was wonderful hearing from you. Awesome meeting you.
Likewise.
Thank you for sharing your work with us. It's been extraordinary. I've enjoyed it tremendously. So thank you, Troy.
Just so you know, we created this show in part so that we can meet all of our favorite people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm honored to be one of your favorite people.
Yes,
and you
exactly.
asked me and you
Like,
told
what
me.
about Troy Gua? Yes, absolutely.
Like, really?
No, when you said, oh my God, yes, I was like,
She was so excited.
like all of the guests, when they say yes, I literally do a happy dance. When you guys say yes, I do a happy dance around my entire house. Like I just, anyway.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you so much. All right, so we are going to, and Troy, again, please stay with us. You know, you're welcome to join in the conversation, but we are going to be moving on to Allen, Afshin, and Sam. So Robin, we're gonna do it, so gentlemen, we're gonna be doing this as an interview roundtable. So please join on in. And of course, fam, please love on Troy, thanking him for his time. Anything you want him to know. Troy, check out that chat. I think it's always good to know how much people are adoring you and loving you. We can't be lifted enough as human beings. So thanks again. So Robin, you wanna start us off? I know you introduced their bios, but Robin and I are gonna go back and forth with this. And of course, fam, you're welcome to put your questions into the chat. And gentlemen, you can join in within the questions as we move forward. You're on mute, Robin. Saying a lot of good, but you're on mute.
I was saying I do not have the agenda pulled up right now.
Oh, I do.
So you will just start us and I will finish.
No worries, no worries. That's what I'm here for.
This is why we have been friends for 20 plus years, because we totally like just have each other's back.
All the time, sis, all the time. All right, so gentlemen, please tell us about yourself and your career before and since working with Prince. Remember, a part of our show is to get to know who you are as an artist. It's not only about Prince, because we're clear that what Prince saw, he saw something that he wanted in his world. So Allen, Sam, Afshin, whoever would like to start first, tell us about yourself, who you are as an artist, and what your work was like before you met Prince and after Prince. Sam, you're lighting up. Are you gonna be first?
Sure. So before I started working with Prince, this was like in the late 90s. This was first when the internet was like becoming a real thing. And, you know, obviously that really sparked Prince's interest. So I'd started learning internet stuff in college. And when I got out, I jumped right into the first internet bubble. And so that really kind of set me up to start doing websites commercially, and then eventually doing websites with him, and also using the internet to connect with fans, specifically starting in Chicago, which is where I'm from, but then you know, using that kind of connection to the fan community to build and eventually work into the MPG Music Club. And I would say that after Prince, I kept in music for a little bit. I went to go to Seattle, where I met Troy, and went to go work with Pearl Jam for a few years, and help them with their web projects, and kind of get them up to speed on what the internet was about. And then took some time at Microsoft and Ebony, and just bouncing around all over. Now I'm in LA, and still doing a lot of graphic design and web work. And it was really interesting to get back involved with Prince through the One Night Alone collection with Sony Legacy, because that was a project that I'd worked on in 2002. And then now to be working on it, yes, exactly, 17 years later, was certainly an interesting and
17 years, wow.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. And I realized it was the first time that I'd worked on a Prince album without Prince. And that was feeling his loss in a very different way than I had before. And so that was interesting. But yeah, that's what I've been up to lately.
So I didn't realize it's been 17 years since One Night Alone. Wow. Like, time really does go.
Yeah, it was 2002. And 2002, I started working on it in 2019.
Yeah, what were the distinctions around, you know, thinking about the first time it was released? Because you were a part of the Live at the Aladdin piece as well with that, and now with One Night Alone. re-releasing? What were the distinctions, like having him present versus not having him present? Did you find yourself saying, you know, this is what he would want?
Yeah, I think that was, that was the challenge, was to find that balance between honoring what we did back in 2002 and then kind of giving it sort of a fresh coat of paint for 2020. Like kind of what Troy was saying is I don't think Prince is the kind of artist that would want to stand still. So I don't think he'd want an exact duplicate of what we did 17 years ago. I think he'd want to, kind of freshen it up. Hopefully my skills have gotten better in 17 years and I can do, what I would consider a better job at putting it all together. But I think also, Prince was someone who creatively was very opinionated. And so as someone who worked with him as a visual artist, having that voice there was a big part of everything that we did. So, sometimes he'd look at something and say, I hate it, do it over. Or he'd say, I love it, like send it out. And have very specific opinions about fonts and colors. And so not having that there was certainly, it was different. It felt like, well, I'm going to do my best to try and figure out what he would like. But, at the same time, I've got to make the call and do what I think is best now in 2020 to put together something good for the audience.
Oh, it's beautiful. I have that. That was my vinyl you saw.
Yeah.
It's beautiful and very well done. Thank you for that.
Who gave you that vinyl?
Robin.
So,
Robin, make sure I have all my vinyl. Thank you, dear.
I used to work in Sony, so
got the hookup.
All right.
No, but it's beautifully done. Sorry. It's beautifully done.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's just gorgeous.
And
Alan,
filled with
Afshin?
Afshin's photography.
Yes.
Thank you, Sam.
So I think that I would love to know also about your working relationship, because obviously you guys work very closely together for a number of years. And this is just a question for both of you off the top of my head. Did you guys ever disagree? And then Prince was like, what's wrong with you? Or did you ever you both thought this is it? And then you give it to Prince and he's like, no. What was that relationship like between the three of you?
Well, I'll jump in real quick. Sam made me look good a lot of times because I was shooting on the fly, really no setups, no lighting. Often things were a little bit out of focus. And so I relied on Sam heavily to make me look good, which he did most of the time. And I appreciate that. Sam, if I haven't thanked you before, thank you now officially. But I think early on, since Sam had was part of the music club and the images that I was taking initially were servicing the music club, I would shoot, quickly turn it around and send it to Sam. So we didn't collaborate so much on the ideas. I would send whatever Prince and I had kind of edited and he had approved to Sam, and then they would go up on the music club. And then slowly I started seeing some of my work turn into poster art and different things. And I wasn't even aware that Sam was doing it, but he was picking out images either by himself or him and Prince were picking things out that all of a sudden, I'm walking around Milan, backstage or in the arena before the show starts, and I see a poster with one of my images that I didn't even know was going to be there. So a lot of the magic was Sam. I think the one time or one of the times that we really kind of got to collaborate and actually were in the same space creating was after Musicology, and Prince was going to do almost like a world tour version of Musicology, which Sam and I were really kind of excited about. And so we were at Paisley Park shooting the tour book with Prince. And the idea, since it was going to be a world tour, was picking out the cities that he was going to be in and finding, online. Sam was pulling imagery from, really kind of iconic places in each city. And then I was shooting Prince on a green screen, and we were going to composite that. And so that was a really fun process to actually get to, spend time with Sam and work on something collectively together. Because most of the time he was taking images that I had, like the 3121 album cover, and really kind of transforming it, making it into something.
Well, I think though that still you both have the eye though, or else it wouldn't have worked. Like, even though you say that like, oh, the lighting or whatever, but obviously there is something there, else he wouldn't have. As a designer, I'm just thinking my designer brain, like
Right.
there has to be something there in the image in order to bring it together to be something.
Yeah, I
Even
had my own personal kind of aesthetic that I think that Prince appreciated and liked, and a lot of that started just kind of going back maybe to the very first question. Before I started with Prince, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and in that respect, one of my first jobs in the business was at Paisley Park as a technician, because all I wanted to do was just get on set however I could. And so I was interested in camera and photography. And so I got on as a film loader and eventually worked my way up to what's called a focus puller or first AC, which also really put me face to face with Prince, because we would get dailies back like the day after or 2 days after, and if things were out of focus, he'd come looking at me like, why is this out of focus? And what you got to understand with Prince, he's dancing and moving around, and the camera's on a crane that's moving around. And so to try to figure out exactly how far those things are from each other, and not having the benefit of HD video, which we have now, I'm really just guessing a lot of the time. Like, I think they're about 17 feet apart, and setting the focus on the lens. So anyway, I worked my way up with Prince from being a technician to actually being a cinematographer and a creative collaborator with him. And then through that process, he liked the motion that I was capturing and asked me if I did still photography too, which I dabbled in and I enjoyed, but I never had built myself out as a photographer. But when Prince asks you if you're a photographer, you say yes, and then you figure it out. So that's how I got into it. Since working with Prince, quite honestly, I still do a lot of photography for myself, like fine art photography, but I haven't really been interested in photographing any musicians. I haven't gone after, after working with Prince, it's really, he's set the bar so high that there's really no one else that I'm like, dying to photograph in that same way. But I've continued to be a filmmaker, and have worked on movies and music videos and commercials, and just most recently directed a documentary that's about to premiere at the Hamptons International Film Festival. So,
what is it? What's it called?
It's called Withdrawn Arms. It's a documentary about Tommy Smith, who was the 1968 Olympic gold medalist at the Mexico City Games, and it's pretty pertinent right now because it was him protesting what was happening back in America at that point. And so much of what he was protesting then is still happening today. But the story is about that, but also kind of his reemergence and his legacy and what he's doing now, because he lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and along with my partner on the film, they've been creating really beautiful art. Yeah.
Thank you, Afshin.
Yes.
So, Allen, can you talk to us a little bit about yourself and your career before and since Prince?
Yes, I'll try. How Prince met me is because I was a fashion photographer. I always did fashion, and he actually saw a poster I did when he was living at Andre Simone's house. He was kicked out of his house at that point. He was living with Andre Simone, and I did a poster for Andre Simone's mother, and it was a black and white poster for Shades of Blackness, and I have it in my book. I don't have it here, but it's probably a 20-inch by 40-inch black and white photograph of two black wonderful models, and it's actually Shades of Blackness. I shot two black people wearing black clothes and on a black background. So that's how we got started. He saw that and he called me instantly, And then we did our first photo shoot. And our first photo shoots were very experimental, I must say. He was searching for a look back then that he just didn't have then. And so he would try a few things before we got serious about album covers, before we got serious about, I guess, anything. I guess one of the most famous ones out of that is the where he's wearing which one are you showing? Yeah, that's the one that.
Showing this is the black couple that he had seen, right?
Right. And he hired me off of that pretty much immediately. And it's kind of funny how that phone call actually was, because he when he talked to me, he kept insisting he was a Warner Brothers artist, and I already knew who he was, because my brother and I had gone out maybe a week before and heard Soft and Wet, and so I knew who he was. And then he convinced me who he was, but I already knew who he was. Let's put it that way. And but my photographs were very experimental, and we went a long way together. I mean, from Dirty Mind to Controversy to 1999 was a big leap as far as what his image was. By 1999, we had it down, and he was ready to go from that point on. But I wish I had a slideshow like Troy did. Troy, that was wonderful. To show all the things that we went through together. But we became friends, and the way we worked was very different than I think Sam did and everybody else did, in that we were really close, and we were actually really friends. I mean, I went on 3 tours with him, and very opinionated he was. I'll second that emotion, for sure. He was like working with somebody different. He definitely had an opinion on who he wanted to look, though. And even every photo that we took didn't make an album cover. Later, it kind of did, and posthumously. I guess I've done 2 albums since then, and but they're not the ones I would have picked out. That's fair. They're the ones Paisley Park picked out. I don't know. Anyway, I guess I was a photographer from the get-go.
So, Alan, you actually kind of lead us into the next question. So, I can never remember the name of the story, but I remember hearing an Italian folktale once where basically the moral of the folktale was that for every person who meets you, there is a story about how they perceive you. So for every 100 people that I know, there's 100 different stories of who Dr. Mauri is. So right. You have this beginning with Allen capturing Prince, and really intentionally, right? Like the Dirty Mind album cover. I personally, Allen, on my end, I said to you earlier when we were doing the test run on the tech, that you are the photographer who inspired me around being so excited to open up an album. I don't know for anybody on the call how long you've been in this loving music game, but I remember being a little girl, like 8 years old and 10 years old, probably should not have been opening up Controversy and seeing the picture with him in the shower and his drawers, which I put on my ceiling, and my mother was like, take that down. Yeah. It was so exciting. I remember opening up records and the pictures and the liner notes and who is he thanking and what the lyrics really are. And like, for me, you're the photographer who I think about when I think about the excitement of that, like my children, they download music. It's not the same. not the same as, you know, like going to the record store and choosing the record because the image is so powerful.
Right.
So what is, like, when you think about in the vein of the Italian folktale, right? What is your story of Prince? And of course, Sam and Afshin, you meet him down the road and he's a much more established artist. And I'd love to hear what the parallels are, because, you know, people are who they are, but then, you know, there's also these distinctions, you know, of the emerging artists versus established.
Like I said, opinionated, like Sam said he was. And when he likes something, he definitely let you know about it. And so, like, staying with the same photographer for as long as he did. I mean, I did Dirty Mind and Controversy in 1999. To stay with one photographer for 3 albums, I think is unbelievable. I don't know how long he stayed with you, Elfin, or how long, Sam, you worked with them on your web, but we spent a lot of time together. So it was fun. We had a lot of good times.
Yeah, the insert that Robin showed with the sheets strategically placed in the 1999 looks like a lot of fun.
Yes, they are. But you can tell
it was fun for me.
It was fun for me. Like, wow, okay.
Me to see him that way, you know, that he was that comfortable with me to you know, actually be naked. I guess he was on one cover. I don't know who took that photograph, but he was that comfortable with me, and he was naked. And I did see him naked, and it's cool.
It's very cool, Alan. You're very modest about that. You know, there's a lot of people on this chat right now that are like, damn, you saw him naked.
Yeah.
That's Afshin. Isn't that book amazing, Afshin?
It's a beautiful book, and I think, Mauri, to your point,
it is amazing.
Alan's images are the pictures that introduced me to Prince as well. So I just had this, but you know, Controversy was the album that got me into Prince, and then I went back to Dirty Mind in 1999. But so when I think about Prince, I think back to when he first came on my radar. And so it's all the images that Alan had created with him. And so, yeah, this is a really beautiful book. Well done, Alan. But it takes me back to the essence of the Prince that, you know, got me excited about his music and his persona and everything. And, you know, I had the advantage of growing up in Minnesota. So Prince was a legend. So it took a while for me to actually get to meet him. And by the time I met him, he was the rock star with Slave written across his face. And
well, the trouble with us was that he changed his phone number so much. You know, people would get his phone number and call him like every day, and I would have like 50 numbers for him, and even the last one doesn't work. I still have it today. It doesn't have an area code. That's how old it is. You know, there's no area code. So, even though he was in Chanhassen and I was in more central Minneapolis, there was no area code back then. And but he would change his number so much that it was kind of funny for the Controversy album. My brother's the one who came up with the Controversy Daily. I mean, if you could show that again, Alvin. That'd be great. My brother came up with the newspapers because he goes, my brother says, well, you need to have some kind of, you know, song titles or something to put behind there. Yes, and so we came up with the Controversy Daily, and I said, just give me headlines, and he gave me like 30, and you know how he is. Elfin and Sam, you probably know this. And he gave me 30 of them, and out of 30 of them, 4 got on the album cover, and the rest pretty much got on the back cover. And actually, you can see where we kind of got when we were first going to do the album cover. I was going to do all 18 titles, and that never worked. And we ended up doing for him. So I'll take any questions from anybody. Being the goat here.
Yeah, actually, you did get some really good questions. Let me just go through the chat.
And we also want to make sure we get to Sam and hear Sam's sentiment about Prince, his version of Prince's story, his version of Prince's story.
I think
Oh,
I got to see a different side of him a little bit, because when I worked for him for a total of 9 years, but I sort of got to know him better around the musicology time, around when he was really into the Jehovah's Witness thing. And so I had a wife and I have a daughter, and I think he really appreciated like my family and that I had a family, and that he really liked having them around. He liked having my daughter around. He got along really great with children. I think Afshin had the same experience. And that was a side of him that, yeah, I think probably was very different than how he'd been before. And part of it was the Jehovah's Witness influence, I think, and kind of longing for that sort of stability in some kind of structure and family. But I know he really liked having them around, and I felt really fortunate that I got to bring him with me on a lot of my trips to go spend time with him, and they got to share in the experience. So that was something a little different.
Yeah, that was different. Between myself and Prince, it was just me and him. It was always just me and him on tour and doing the album covers one by one. And but we got kind of close too. So yeah, he was very different with you. Well, that's good to hear, though.
Yeah, it's probably about 20 years later, I would guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely evolved as an artist and had different values.
Yeah, no, he started in '79 to right up to Purple Rain. I mean, he was shooting Purple Rain right down from my studio. And I was wondering why I wasn't shooting that, but I think his management at that time had an opinion about me. And I think I had done too much. I think was the problem with that.
Was the sentiment from Warner's, you think, Alan?
I was enough, and I had done enough, or even though we talked about doing the Purple Rain album cover, he photographed it just the way we talked about it, where we would have these meetings, we would talk about shooting, and I told him the way you shoot it, and he shot it exactly the way I set it up. So it's almost like the only thing I didn't do was press the button. And I don't even know who shot that. To tell you the truth, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna ask who like Robin. I meant to ask you that. Like who shot Purple Rain? Who shot the album cover? Was it Albert Magnoli? Was it like from that?
It was like, I don't know. That's a good question.
Like who shot Purple Rain?
I never thought of that.
Wasn't it Alan Whitman?
No,
Alan Whitman did it.
Not Alan. Something Whitman. Yeah.
Robert
John Whitman. Robert Whitman. I think Robert Whitman.
Mr. Whitman.
Robert, see, I was right. Nerd alert.
Nerd alert. Yeah, Alan, we talked about that. It's like, who shot Purple Rain? Because it doesn't say, it really doesn't. It's funny. Like it's the album, right? It's the one that took him over from,
If I would have shot that one myself, I think I would have been more famous. But I was almost famous.
No, you're very famous, actually, Alan.
You're extremely famous.
You're extremely famous. Like, I think, again, you're another example of the artists who don't always recognize the impact that they have.
Right.
Like you are extremely famous in the in our community here among Prince fans. You are. Like I know for me, you're very famous. I know exactly I knew who you were. And as a matter of fact, what kind of inspired this particular episode is being at Paisley and seeing you speak. We didn't get to bring Steve Park on, but we're definitely gonna invite Steve Park on for another episode with Jeff Katz.
I love Steve. Steve's a great guy.
Steve and Jeff Katz are another two other artists who were very monumental in capturing who we know Prince to be. We're definitely going to invite them on for a future episode, but each of you have your own piece in shaping Prince. So Sam, I want to start with you with this particular question around, in terms of contribution, what was the Jennings effect? What was the Shahidi effect? What was the Beaulieu effect in contributing to Prince in terms of his marketing and his brand? Sam, I think you definitely brought Prince into the 21st century, as he's known as the artist who, like, basically, you know, walked away from the record company. I'm gonna release my own records. I'm gonna sell them as a part of a concert ticket price. I'm gonna hit the charts that way, using the web. I mean, that's all around the time with you, Sam. So if you can please enlighten us to, like, where do you see yourself in shaping Prince's image at the time that you work with him? And that's a question for each of you.
Yeah, definitely. You know, like I said, I was starting in the 90s doing web stuff, but then, you know, it was a very interesting time in the music industry as well, because of, you know, Napster and the real fear that people had about file sharing. And there was a real fear in the music industry that the internet was just going to destroy everything, and artists were going to be, well, not really artists, but record labels were going to be completely broke. And it was the worst thing ever. So, you know, I think Prince had the exact opposite feeling of, like, you know, this is a way for me to connect directly with my audience and skip the record industry entirely. And, you know, I kind of felt he was really looking for someone to help him do that. And because of my working in the industry, and I think because of our working relationship, it just allowed him to, you know, just try out a lot of ideas and have somebody who then could go out and make that happen. And so that was a lot of, you know, just going back and forth about how we saw things shaping up. You know, I was kind of bringing a fan perspective. He would bring his perspective, you know, what was going to serve the audience and also serve his needs and make sure that they're both being met. You know, I really felt like it was really important for him to kind of get that message out there that, like, you know, he wants that connection with his audience directly more than anything else. And, you know, I think now Troy had mentioned, you know, Patreon. I think the MPG Music Club was the Patreon of its time. And that's how he really viewed it. Like, when you're paying $9.99, you're not paying to some CEO of a record label, you're paying me. Like, I'm getting that money. And that allows me to do what I do, which you enjoy, and then we have this symbiotic relationship. I think that was really the goal with what he was doing. And so I felt like, yeah, like, my effect was definitely, you know, he found a partner in me that could help him do that, and someone who was willing to work with him and listen to him and share ideas and say, this is going to work, this is not going to work, this I think we worked with, this is the right thing to do here. And it wound up working out for a long time. Music Club lasted for 5 years, and I'm pretty proud of that. 5 years is an eternity in Prince world.
A long time. It is a long time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that.
No, that is a long time with Prince. You know, I mean, like I said, I did 3 albums, which I thought was an eternity. And if you were with him for 5 years, that's an eternity.
I just want to say this one thing.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go on from there.
To answer your question, Mauri, similar to Sam, I think he found someone in me and the other photographers he worked with, but my experience was that someone that could facilitate what he needed at the time in terms of that interaction with it, that direct interaction with his fans. And so again, using the music club as that bridge between him and the fans. And so I was somebody that could travel. Nowadays, artists all have photographers and videographers and everything just following them around. But Prince was unique because nobody else really was doing it to that level at that time, where no one else was allowed to also be in there photographing. So he had full control of the image. And so whether we were on tour, and typically on a tour, they allow the press and everyone else to come in and photograph the first 3 songs. and then the presser ushered out. Well, Prince wasn't allowing anyone in with cameras. I was the only one in there with the camera, and in that way, we were able to go through, and he could control fully the image and put what he wanted people to see. So I think that was really important to him, and that was kind of the part of the takeover in terms of having full autonomy of music, image, brand. And similar to Allen, I was able to work by myself. I didn't have a big crew. I didn't have any crew really. It was just me, my camera. Occasionally at Paisley Park, my wife would come out with me and we would do a little, a small setup, lighting setup or whatever. But for the most part, I was by myself, whether we were on tour or just doing a photo shoot. He didn't want to have a lot of other people around, and so he felt comfortable and safe, and so we were able to experiment. And I think that's what I was able to provide for him. He had a lot of input in the image once I kind of created the setting, and then it would inspire him, and he'd be like, oh, okay. So if I had a certain color backdrop or items, it would spark something in him, because I never told him what to wear. That was not that was not my place or really even within my realm of understanding. But whenever Prince saw whatever I had set up, it would inspire something, and he would run off and come back 10, 15, 20 minutes later, like, dressed as Prince perfectly for whatever that scenario was.
I love it. So Afshin, I have my book here. Your book is also one of my favorites. I don't know if you can see.
Thank you.
Can I get it in? It's a picture with Prince in the box. Can you see it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I love this picture because I remember this is like, I believe this is musicology. Yes, it is musicology. I remember being in the audience, and my cousin Rachel and I'm like, he's in that box. I know he's in that box. And you really, I love your book is perfectly titled, A Private View, right? It is, you bring us into this world that, he creates this world for us, but there's so much intentionality in how it all goes down. So either it was in Jersey, or I don't know if it was MSG, because I think MSG can actually come through the flooring, but I think it was one of the shows. And I remember the box passing by us. I was like, he's in that box. I know he's in that box.
Almost every show he went through the box because it was in the round.
Right.
And those stadiums were either basketball or hockey arenas. There was no real way to go from underground up into the main floor and then come up. So he was always boxed and pushed out. A lot of times people just had no idea. They thought maybe it's his wardrobe or costumes being taken, but he was always in that box. Going in. I tried to get in that box once and see if I could go with him, but it wasn't enough room.
Yeah, it was a very small box, but I think
it was a very small box.
But that's like Prince was so intentional about how he created the scene or the environment, right? Like the mystery was always there. Like that's why, Allen, it's appropriate that you're in the dark, because we're like it's how Prince did, and brought us into his world. So I love that picture, because I'm like, I always knew he was in that box. And I was like, when I saw your book, I was like, you see, he was in the box, because it's the creation of this moment. Like, I don't want to spoil it for you. I'm not going to walk out in front of everyone. I'm going to show up magically, and here I am. So thank you for that.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, please.
I also have Afshin's book. It's one of my favorites. And I just want to let you know, this is kind of an aside from what we're talking about. On page 141, when I got to that page, I think I cried for about 3 hours. It's the page that says the fans were everything for him and he was everything for them. I just bawled like a baby. And I will tell you why, because it's obviously Prince fans are very passionate about Prince. We all think that, we get something that a lot of the world doesn't get. And just to know that he kind of got what he meant to us, just getting that confirmation was just, it was kind of like a release. It was kind of a relief, okay, he understood. He didn't think that we're all just these crazy people just spending hundreds of dollars to see him, and he got that we had a connection.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I just cried.
Aww.
Thank you for putting that in.
I feel like the music club really personified that in a lot of ways, because I know in talking to him about it, I mean, that's really how he viewed the people who were part of the club, is that, you know, they were willing to go the extra mile. So obviously they were the people who were the most dedicated. And I think you really saw on the Musicology tour when we had the music club members, you know, right in the front, and the One Night Alone tour when he was doing the sound checks, you know, I think he really understood that these were the people who supported him the most, and that, you know, really got it on some other level. They weren't just there to hear Kiss and all that stuff.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Okay, so moving on, I just wanted to say that before I forget.
Thank you.
So Alan, same question around, you know, where do you see yourself in forming his image?
Well,
So
I mean,
Alan had the underwear years.
yeah, you know, we had the image building years,
Yeah, you sure did.
and we started out with a bare trench coat with a bikini and leg warmers, and I think the final image I did of 1999 with him and his band, we actually did have the purple coat with the white ruffles that I think he stayed with. So after that, I guess my job was done. He had his look that he liked, and I'm happy for him. I'm happy that everybody kind of saw him like that, and because that's why he wanted people to see him, I guess. I guess I didn't articulate that too much, but that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Alan. So Alan, we want to go to the chat, Robin, a little bit, because there's some questions coming up for our guests.
Sure.
So Alan, one of the questions, and this is from Maryland, is around, you told a story about the person who introduced Vanity to Prince, debunking the myth about them meeting at an award show. Can you confirm it here again?
Yes, I can confirm it, that Vanity was kind of a groupie. She kind of...
Robin, we had a chance. I'm just joking.
Yeah, everybody at that point. I had backstage passes, and Denise happened to be one of them. And Denise actually hung on to me, and so she always got backstage. And after backstage, she got back on the bus and stayed on the bus. So that's how it happened. They didn't meet at an award show.
They didn't meet at the AMAs, or she wasn't on Rick James' stage. That's not true?
No, not that I know of anyway. For her to be at the AMAs.
You heard it on the Paradigm.
I know, but I'm saying for her to be at the AMAs would be like me being at the AMAs. It would be very unusual.
The story always is that she was like a part, like Rick James had performed at the AMAs, and that she was a part of Rick James's set, which we will be dedicating a show to Rick James and Prince.
Oh, okay.
It's coming up shortly. It's coming up, because I love me some Rick James, and we got to talk about this 1981 Dirty Mind tour. But that's for another episode. The story is that she was on stage.
All of that, and I met Rick James, and Prince and him didn't actually get along that well.
That's why it's gonna make a great show.
Too bad, but I only did one show with them. So, but yeah, he didn't meet Vanity through Rick James or anything like that. She met Prince through me, pretty much.
Wow. All right. Okay. Thanks, Alan, for clarifying that. Sure. I'm sure brains are going, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
I had a big fight on Facebook with some girl about AMAs and where they met, and it was just so weird because I know the story. So
you were there. Like, you know, some Prince fans think that, you know, because they read it in like a magazine 40 years ago.
Read it in Black Beat in 1982.
Yeah, but it's like you were actually there, so I'm gonna trust the person who saw it in real time.
I think you and Vanity's a beautiful woman. Who I would remember the day I met Vanity and introduced her to somebody. Come on now. Come on, really.
So yeah,
And Alan, like, actually, speaking of Vanity, Alan, the pictures of Vanity and Prince in your book. I'm flipping to them now.
Just
so,
amazing.
like, what's your memory of Vanity and Prince? Like who were they together as a couple?
Pure love. I mean,
aww.
I mean, they loved each other so much. It was ridiculous.
But he gave her a hard time in the studio, Alan.
Well, you know, I think they both gave each other a hard time. When it came to Purple Rain, she was supposed to be Apollonia, but she was supposed to do it for free, and she wouldn't do it for free. So we had a kind of a talk about that, and I mean, we knew about Purple Rain since Controversy, so I'm not going to say anything bad. He was all good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm a big Denise Matthews fan. I think that she was ahead of her time in terms of women and the embodiment of our sexuality. And I appreciate her tremendously, and she doesn't always, you know, get the credit that she deserves. And you also work not only with like with Prince, but you also did the work with Vanity 6. Yeah. You also did the work with The Time.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Alan, and like enlighten us? Like, what was that project like coming together? Because you were there when Prince was in the studio getting Vanity 6 together and bringing that vision to life.
Right. He really was on the Name the Hookers for a long time. Let me tell you that. He wasn't going to let that one go. That's all I remember about Vanity 6. The Time. Morris was a really good friend of mine. So I knew about Morris when he came in and do the first album cover in black and white. And I showed him where we were going to shoot. He really liked it, and I got everybody there, and that's the first time I met everybody, actually. So it was just one of Prince's side projects, and you know, but he wrote music a lot, and he was very into music. I think the music that he did, that he created, was so important to him that he had so much of it that he gave it to other people. Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about philanthropy. That's true love. That's like giving away one of your children. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think Troy speaks about that in his influence video, right? The prolificness of Prince, and yeah, the you know, I'm sure the women have many stories, but him giving, and Jill Jones talks about. We had Jill Jones on our first episode, and she talks a lot about, you know, him giving her the music. It is the ultimate act of love, and I agree. For him, it would have been like giving away one of his children, because like that's the music that I look back on now, and I'm like, that's the music that raised me. Yeah. You know, so it's so integral to the evolution of the person if you're following the artist, and furthermore the artist who's creating it.
No, it was definitely great. First doing Vanity and then The Time. It was great, and Prince was there, and he was kind of a little bit of an art director to me, not that much, but just a little. But everything worked out just fine.
Thanks, Alan. So D'Angela, I'm going to invite you to come on and ask your question. Hi, D'Angela.
Is she there?
Yes, I'm here, but I'm in the dark.
That's okay. We can hear your beautiful voice. How are you, sweetheart?
I'm great. So I would like to say thank you guys for doing this. This is awesome. And I'd like to thank all the guests for so much amazing art. And that's really all I can say. But the question is, Afshin actually answered on his end, which is like, where could we buy any prints from either Afshin or Allen? And Afshin put in the chat, thank you for that, where you can purchase some prints. So I would love to be able to purchase some Allen Beaulieu prints. Is that ever going to be a possibility? Or is there complications with the estate, since so much of your photography is attached to a state project.
None of my photography was, but I know later on down the line he learned from me actually. Yes, so I think in the year 2020, I was going to have a website, then the disease came along and COVID-19 came along and stopped me from setting up a website. But I'm going to have a website that's going to have the photos in the book, and they will be available.
Awesome. That is music to my ears. Thank you so much.
Oh, you bet. So just keep tuned in.
Thanks so much, D'Angela. So D'Angela is another Princeologist. D'Angela, please put your next event in our chat. D'Angela puts together the most amazing events around Prince and keeping that legacy alive. And we're so glad to have you here, D'Angela. So I know you have an event coming up next month, so please put it in the chat and share it with our community. Matt Emery, you want to come on and ask your question about lighting?
Oh, hey, Alan, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
I had a couple questions for Alan. The first one I asked was earlier on. I wanted to see who was your favorite person to hang out with on tour next to Prince, of course, because you're on different tours. So was there a band member in Prince's band or in the time that you like to hang out with the most? And then the other question I had was, and you kind of answered that because you said that he was kind of a little bit of an art director. Did Prince ever want to try to tweak your lighting when you're in your studio? So two questions for you.
Yeah, never tweaked my lighting. I was pretty much a studio cat. I mean, I know and Afshin can actually get into this too, is shooting him live, a live person, and shooting a studio person is quite different. And so when I did album covers, it was very easy for me because that's the world I was from. And then it took me probably 2 or 3 concerts to get together on shooting him, like running around and jumping up and down and dancing. But that's a different question. What was your first question? Oh, did I hang out with anybody?
Yeah, who'd you hang out with, and which of his band members or maybe a member of the time did you like to shoot the most?
Probably Morris was B number 2. We hung out a lot and have a lot of time together, and definitely are friends. And to this day, we're still friends. I hope we are. I mean, I gave him a photo, so let's hope we are still friends. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt, for joining in. Troy, you have a question for Alan? You want to ask it? You're on mute, Troy.
Are you talking about the neon question?
Yes.
So the neon artwork that you used for the 1999 album, was that custom made? Do you have that stuff? What happened to it?
Yeah, I don't have it anymore, unfortunately, Troy. I wish I still did.
Was that specifically for the album shoot?
Yes. He told me to go see Blade Runner, and Blade Runner wasn't out in the theaters, and it wasn't out at Blockbuster, and it wasn't before. It was before the internet. So I just asked people, what was it like? And people kept saying there's a lot of neon and a lot of smoke. So that's what I got Prince in. A lot of neon and a lot of smoke.
Well, you captured it perfectly.
Thank you.
You're my hero, Alan.
It was like all those pieces were custom made. And then we just kind of guessed at, a futuristic kind of time ahead kind of look, and went for that. So that, in answer to the neon and everything else, that it was custom made. And no, I don't have it. I wish I did.
I wish you did too.
Yeah. lot of sets I wish I would have kept, but I really didn't have the room to
I know how that goes.
stuff. You know, from the time to Vanity 6 to Princess stuff, I just didn't have the room to store. So once it was used, it was used.
And luckily memorialized, right?
Yeah.
We get to see it still. I mean, like it's forever imprinted,
right,
in our minds. Allen, were you involved at all in the 1999 box release?
I was. I mean, they used all my photographs.
They used your photographs, right?
And all I can say from that is that they were pretty true to use all those photos. And they're pretty true to the original. So I guess that was pretty good. That was fun to see. It was like stepping back in time to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's similar to what Sam shared about One Night Alone.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Matt, I'm going to let you ask your question to Sam.
Well, before I ask the question, I don't know if Sam remembers this, but before he even worked for Prince, he and I waited for hours and hours and hours at the MGM. What was that club called where Prince played?
That was Studio 54, right?
What's that?
Studio 54, right?
Studio 54.
Yeah.
We were there together, waiting for hours for that show. It's good to see you again, brother.
I do remember. Thank you. Good to see you too.
Yeah.
My question was, you know, it's always fun to look back at Prince's tour books, and I think if I'm remembering correctly, Sam has created 4. He has designed 4 of Prince's tour books. Which one is your favorite of those? Which one are you most proud of, and why? And then also, how hands-on was Prince in the creation of those? Did you just show it to him and on the computer, and then he'd say yes or no? Tell us about that process.
Yeah. So, you know, after I was involved first just doing web stuff, and then as Steve Park kind of moved on, I got brought in to do more creative things and more of an art director role, which was really great. And yeah, the tour books were a lot of fun. I would say the image that really stands out to me is the cover of the musicology tour book that Afshin took, because I just spent a lot of time on that photo. And everyone, you know, it's nice to think that Prince looked perfect. You know, he woke up like that, but that wasn't always the case. And I know, I think Afshin would back me up in saying that sometimes there were instances where Prince would get Afshin, you know, to come to his hotel room or something and say, yeah, let's do some photos. And he would just kind of, you know, wouldn't necessarily be 100%. And he would just say, well, Sam will fix it. And that was kind of my role, was to go in there and like move things around and, you know, trim up his whiskers and everything. So I spent a lot of time on that cover for the musicology tour book, and I was really proud of the way it came out. I really enjoyed that process. And yeah, he was very hands-on. So I lived in Chicago. He was in Minneapolis most of the time, and I would usually fly up there about once a month. And it would be like a week of just solid work, him and me, on whatever we were doing. So most of the time it was him sitting over my shoulder, giving me direction, saying, move this, change that. Then he'd disappear for a while, go do whatever in studio A or B. And then he'd call and say, you got something to see? And I'd say, yep. And he'd come up and he'd check it out, and he'd give more notes and say, move this around. You know, like I said before, he was very opinionated, which for me was great. Like some people, I think, probably would let their ego get in the way, be like, think that they know better. But my feeling was always like, at the end of the day, it's his image, it's his name on the book. Like, if that's what he wants, then I'm here to make it work. And I think that's why we worked well together for so long. So that's one, the musicology cover stands out to me.
And I'll just back that up. Before I said Sam's a magician, and he was a magician on that one, because we took that picture at 4 a.m. I had already gone to bed when my phone rang at like 2:30 in the morning. Prince was saying, are you up? I'm like, yeah, I'm up. He said, okay, come on over. And so imagine a 4 a.m. photo shoot after a long day with no equipment or lights or anything. And Sam made it look like
he
was up and running. Yeah.
I love it. So Afshin, as you're talking, I'm here like looking through everyone's work. And Afshin, one thing I'm looking at in your book is the 3121 parties. So like the year before my mom passed, I woke her up in the middle of the night and I said, we're going to Club Rio. We're going to go check out Prince. Right. And she was like, she was a teacher and she was like, it's open school night. I'm like, you're not going to make it this year. And I'm glad that happened because unfortunately the next year she passed away of pancreatic cancer. So that's like my last memory of going to a Prince concert with my mom. And I'm looking at the 3121 pictures and I'm thinking, damn, I always remember wanting to be at those. And I had a taste of it at Club Rio. I went for the first 2 nights and it was dope and it was amazing. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what was Prince generating at that time? Because I mean, a part of marketing and branding is creating the exclusive brand, right? When you've been invited to the party and everybody wants to go to the party, and Prince did that with these 3121 shows in his home, and it was last minute and it was, exciting to be invited. And here you are as the photographer capturing these moments. So can you talk to us, and I'm sure being waking up at 2:30 in the morning when you yourself have a family, you have a wife and a family going on. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience in memorializing this time period?
Yeah, definitely. Those were probably some of the best times and some of the greatest memories of working with Prince. But I think a couple of things that a lot of people don't know about those parties. One, that you probably know that 3121 came from the address of the first house that he had leased or rented in LA, and where he started throwing those parties. But we were also making a film at the time, the 3121 film. And so a lot of times these parties were just a way to get a lot of extras. And he'd have a party scene, but he would throw a real party, people would come over, and then we were filming it. And so a lot of times we would film a lot before the big party kind of came around, but they were initially just like sets almost for the 3121 film. And then they became a thing, and he started throwing these parties after kind of major Hollywood events. So whether it was the Oscars or the Golden Globes or the Emmys or even the Grammys, and it was the hottest ticket in town. People would make their rounds of whatever the parties were, the Governor's Ball and Elton John's, but the Prince party was the last stop and the biggest ticket. And it was just really fascinating in terms of Prince as an icon, is that people would come to these parties, people that anyone else would look at and say, okay, these are like A-list celebs. It's J-Lo and Tom Cruise and, all these people are coming. But the second they're in Prince's house, they're just groupies and fans. And to watch these people in Prince's presence was being awestruck was just really, really neat. I mean, it spoke to his significance as an artist and a musician and as an icon. But shooting those was a lot of fun. It was half work and half play for me, because there were no, a lot of times he didn't even say, come shoot these parties. I was there and I had my camera and I would photograph, and sometimes he'd be like, don't even, I just want everyone to chill and I don't want people to feel like, there's a camera there and they're kind of editing what they're doing. But he did definitely appreciate the pictures, because a lot of times he would, whatever I had shot, he would have printed and put in frames. And then I would, and probably Sam can speak to that because he probably did a lot of it, but I would go to the house the next night and some of the pictures from the previous night would already be in frames and up around the house, which was really interesting. And then the parties continued even the next year when he was in another house. He went and changed the physical address of the house to 3121. I'm sure it drove the mailman crazy, but it became a thing. And I don't know where that was in terms of the timeline of the album versus the parties. Obviously the parties and the 3121 came first, but then the album. So they were pretty great. And I think it was a time for everyone to let their hair down. And he also, the other really kind of cool thing about the parties was that he had instruments set up. And so he played, but the instruments were there open for anyone else to come. And there was a lot of musicians that came through that would get on the instruments and kind of jam with Prince. And that was another kind of highlight of the party, to be there and to see Stevie Wonder or Alicia Keys or a number of people, you know, get on and jam with Prince. It was fantastic. Joni Mitchell.
Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey on the bongos often. That was usually, late night Matthew McConaughey on the bongos.
How was that?
It was hilarious.
Did he need more cowbell, or was he on point?
Yeah, exactly. More cow. No, it was a
more cowbell was needed. So yeah. Sam talked about, you know, Prince being, like, at the time when Sam was working with him becoming a Jehovah's Witness and being enamored with Sam and his family. Afshin, I know I love your posts about your wife. You adore her, and your family. So beautiful. I have so much commentary about Yara. If you ever want to hear it, I think as an educator, I'm so inspired by her. I think she's delightful. You captured a lot of pictures of Prince and Manuela, and at that time, like, who was Prince in your opinion as a husband? You know, I love Manuela. She's done like a different In a Perfect World charity work, and I've joined into that from the educator angle in my life. Like, what did you see within their relationship? Because there's some pictures in your book about them, and it really, really captures, like, I'm looking at the beautiful moment in Vegas after the show.
Right.
Like, we always know Prince as a musician, but there was, this definite evolution of who he was as a man, beyond the dirty mind and the underwear. He evolved beyond that space. So what would be your commentary on that, Afshin?
Well, I'm usually pretty hesitant to talk about his relationships. What I can tell you in terms of the evolution, because like I had said, when I first met Prince, he was the rock star Prince, skinny, tight clothes, slave written across his cheek. Don't look at him in the eye. And I worked with him almost continuously for close to 20 years from that point. And so I saw the transition from Prince, the rock star, to Prince, the mature statesman that I feel like he became. So I got to see that evolution, and even the transformation from the rock star to the Jehovah's Witness. I was at Paisley Park actually the day that his mother passed, and we were going to shoot something that day, and we ended up not shooting it. And I remember that was a big change happened after that, and as a result of that, obviously he was very close, and so that was a very devastating and life-changing experience. But I also saw the evolution of his relationships, because I was there when he was with Maite, and then through Manuela, and post that. And I think, again, I'll show you just one picture, but I think this is the mature Prince as opposed to the earlier Prince that I first got to meet. And I can say this, I mean, I don't know where their relationship went, but that he adored Maite and he adored Manuela, almost to the same degree, maybe in different ways, in different times. But when he was a husband, for at least a period of time, the full focus was there. But he had a lot of interests, and so there was a lot that I think would make it really difficult to have an intimate type relationship with Prince. And not just because he was a rock star and that he had access to a lot of women or people kind of throwing themselves at him, but he had his passion for his music and his work. And so there was a lot that took his attention away, potentially, to what would nurture a relationship. And I think for that reason, maybe because he didn't necessarily have it within his own life, he appreciated, seeing Sam and his family, and similarly me and my family, and his closeness with them and with our children was probably something, because he didn't have access to it himself. but also it was the kind of thing where he could say goodbye and we were out versus it being a full-time permanent thing.
I just want to say, one thing. Afshin, I included that in my little introduction to all of you, that same photo that you just shared. I love that particular period because I call that the gentleman period. Like, he was just so gentlemanly. Like, you know, even though I was like, oh, he's so buttoned up, I also appreciated that he like sort of came full circle and became like he just seemed like he's always been self-confident, but he just seemed really self-contained in a certain way, like a certain level of peace. And he had like this just gentlemanly, like, you know, this gentlemanness about him that I just like really appreciate it. And that's actually one of my favorite photos. I love that photo because it's just like so
but
honest.
also, Robin, I think like it's the time period, you know, I think between like the Sam and the Afshin years, like Prince stopped believing he had to prove himself worthy. Like he stepped into a worthiness and understanding of his excellence and dynamicism as a musician.
You can see it in his face.
Yeah, there was just like, this is who I am. Here it is. I'm Prince, and I'm going to be unapologetic about it, but not in the arrogance, like watch me show up and be so mysterious that you can't see me. I'm actually going to allow you to see me, and this is it. You know, I appreciated the musicology into 3121 time because it was just like he became so clear of who he was for this world in regards to music. And I think that that's very different from the time period where Allen was, you know, of course, in the emerging Prince years. I'm going to shock, I'm going to be in my underwear, I'm going to keep on doing jazz hands until the place that I don't have to do it. I remember going to Club Black after Prince got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He did a show here in New York at Club Black, and Michael Phillips was on stage playing sax. And I remember being in the front row and staring at Prince, and Prince telling me, like, stare at him. And I'm like, no, I'm staring at you. And he's like, no, stare at Mac. But he had come to that place. I remember that moment where it was like, no, the music, right? I am the music, right? So therefore, pay attention to the music. Don't worry about me in my drawers. Don't worry about me in my heels. Don't worry about me being jazz hands, because the music speaks for itself. And I think that, you know, Sam into the world of Afshin really speaks to that moment where he became clear about his value. And I think we rode out the time from the early 90s to, you know, where he left us in that space of, I am worthy. I am the greatest guitarist of this particular generation. Like, he stepped into that powerfully. Whereas before, I think there was a piece of let me prove myself, which I guess is, you know, the emerging piece of any artist who's coming up. But I definitely remember that musicology piece. And you call it the gentleman years, Robin. Yeah, because he didn't have to show his skin no more. He didn't have to be naked anymore. And he was still beautiful, and he was still sexy, and he was still fun, and he was still talented without having to do all that, you know, look at me. Look at me. I don't know, Afshin, Sam, Allen, you know, please chime in.
I think you're both perfectly right. He didn't have anything to prove to anybody at that point. And he realized it. And he was at peace a lot more so from then on than I had seen him in the previous 10 years that I had, you know, worked with him. Right. So it definitely was a big change.
Yeah, I mean, for me and Afshin also, when we started working with him, you know, that was a period of time where he was essentially an underground artist. I mean, he had done rave on a major label, but he hadn't really gotten the same Prince popularity since he'd done the Symbol and all that. People kind of wrote him off. And so to go from working with someone as essentially an independent artist to then blow up in 2004, where he's on the cover of Rolling Stone again, I mean, that was quite a whirlwind experience, at least for me. But it felt for him very natural. Like, it didn't feel, he didn't seem surprised at all about anything that was happening. Like, it just all felt like, well, of course this would be happening. Of course, like, I'm going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. And of course, I'm going to play the Super Bowl. I mean, it was all just very like, yeah, this is where it's at. I think the musicology tour was definitely, you know, you saw a real celebration of, this is my music. You know, he did a lot of different songs that he'd kind of shunned up until that point. And the vibe of it was very like a party.
I love it. I love it. So what advice would you give your younger, you have a question, Robin?
I want to ask my question.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so this sort of came up a little bit. It's going in a slightly different direction. Okay, I want to know, it seems like Prince seemed to be somewhat of an avid photographer in his own right. And I wanted to know if you ever saw some of his work as photographers, like what you thought. Did you ever give him advice? Do you think he was inspired or influenced by you? I'm asking the two photographers. I don't know if Allen is still there. Is he still there? He's there. He's there. I just, because I mean, like, going back to like the autobiography that was published, he's on the cover holding a camera at a very young age, like a teenager. So I was like, oh, so he actually had this thing for photography himself for a really long time, I think. So like, I want to know, like, did you ever see some of his work? Was it any good? I mean, he was so great at so many things. I was just curious to know, like, if you ever said, no, Prince, like, you should really like angle like this, or how?
No, he never brought it up to me.
Really?
Yeah, never.
So you've seen the cover of that book that was published. He's holding a camera.
Right.
And he never talked to you about photography? That's...
Never.
Huh.
I think maybe it was something that just came on later. He definitely was interested in photography when I was working with him, and the fact that digital cameras now gave him that immediate kind of report back and almost gratification to see the image, I think was important to him. And he actually pushed me to start shooting digital because he wanted to see the images right away. I first started shooting Prince on film, and digital cameras were not that great. I think Steve Park has talked about having to use some of the first digital cameras and how horrible they were, and they were maybe slightly better when I was working with him, but what he wanted was to be able to see the images right away. But he was interested in photography, so much so that I actually bought him a camera, and I just jokingly said, I'm happy you can't duplicate yourself, because then you wouldn't need me, because he was, you know, he had a very unique eye, not so much with lighting and things, but, you know, he had, by the time I started working with him, you know, he had worked with some of the greatest photographers. He had worked with Allen, who's here, and Avedon, and, you know, Herb Ritz. And so a lot had, through osmosis, he had absorbed. And so he knew a lot. And for me, I do have to say, I learned a lot from him. I think Matt asked about lighting, and in many situations, not with the photography, but when I was filming him, when we were doing motion stuff, I would light a scene, and then he'd eventually come down, look around, and he'd ask me to turn off 2 or 3 lights, you know, and I would, and somehow it actually end up looking much nicer. So he had been around it for so long by the time I came around that he definitely had an opinion and an affinity, and enjoyed photography. And so, yeah, I bought him a digital camera. Like, here, when I'm not around, you have a toy. Not that he couldn't have bought one for himself, but.
Yeah, well, and he, you know, I often say that if Prince knew how to use Photoshop, I wouldn't have had a job. I mean, he definitely wanted to do just about everything. I mean, he was very interested in everything. I think Eric Leeds had said the same thing about playing, you know, saxophone. It's like if Prince felt he was good enough, he would have just done it himself. And so that was true for a lot of things. But, you know, as far as seeing his photos, yeah, I mentioned it before, but like there were a lot of times he'd be setting up lighting to shoot a photo of a friend of his or the band, and I was just around, so he'd use me as a stand-in. So I have a bunch of photos of myself taken by him, Yeah, not purposely, but I still count them as photos by Prince of myself. So,
Right.
so, but yeah, like you were saying, I think the digital camera really was something he was definitely interested in, and glad that he had the opportunity to try something that made it easy.
I just thought of something too. I remember Susan Moonsey posted this photo of herself from the Apollonia 6 album, and she said it's like the one with she's crying or whatever, she's a tear coming down and she's holding a teddy bear. She said that Prince took that photo and they used it for the album. So I was like, okay, this must be a thing. Am I the only person who saw that?
I saw it.
Huh?
I saw it. I can co-sign on that for you.
Okay. So I'm just, so being that Allen was still around in those days, I'm just like, kind of like, wow, he didn't talk about it. It's interesting. Maybe he wasn't
maybe how he defined himself. Maybe he didn't see himself in that light necessarily.
Yeah.
So he relied on others to do it.
Yeah, he never took photos when I was there anyway. Or he never had a camera.
He never had a camera?
Never.
Never. That's amazing.
No. And we had a lot of photo shoots, so it wasn't a rare thing. I mean, we pretty much would shoot 4 days a week. And he would call me up at 4 in the morning too, and you know, come out and shoot. You know, it was weird. I mean, the 4 in the morning stuff. Elfin can kind of relate to when you're called up and you don't realize that you're actually doing a shoot at that time of the morning. It's tough.
Did any of you ever just tell Prince, no, I'm not coming out. It's 4 a.m. I need to get some sleep. Did anybody ever say that? I will tell a funny story. I have a friend who actually was friends with Prince's lawyer. I can't remember his name.
Londell.
Anyway, Londell. And she called me late one night and she was like, you have to come out. Londell just invited us out. Prince is gonna be there. You have to come. And I'm like, it's 2 a.m. I have to work tomorrow.
I could have kicked her. I'm like, go.
Of course, she never invited me again, but I needed that job. So I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to go to work. I just want to know, am I the only dummy who ever said no?
Yes, you are. I can answer that question for the Gus. Yes.
I think, you know, when you're working with him and you stick around a while, it's because you can kind of go with the flow. Like he needed people who could kind of go with his flow. He wasn't, you know, it's kind of a cliche. People say that he didn't work on other people's schedules. He worked on his own, but it was definitely true. Like if he wanted to do something at 4 a.m, why not? Like he just thought like, this is when I'm up. This is when I'm active. Why not do it at 4 a.m? And so if you were cool with that, then you'd stick around a while. If you weren't cool with that, then he'd find somebody who was, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Clearly, I need my sleep, so I wouldn't have lasted very long. So there you
I
go.
couldn't believe she didn't go. So she called. I'm like, you didn't go? Why didn't you go?
I didn't tell you about that?
You did tell me. You told me in real time about that, and I was like, you should have gone. Like I'm managing Department of Education calls about teachers returning to work tomorrow right now as we're going through the show. So I'm like, I'm very clear on respond to the call. So like really. So the question I did have though was about what advice would you give to the younger versions of yourselves, knowing you're going to be working with Prince, considering what you know now? What advice would you give? And then that, of course, accelerates towards thinking about young artists who are coming up. What advice would you give to them? So that trajectory, who you were, what advice would you give your younger self, considering working with Prince? What would you tell younger artists who are on the rise?
I wish I had an answer to that. I actually don't. I had to do the ultimate because there was no Photoshop. There was no touching up. There was no back then there was no internet, no cell phone. Either you had his phone number or you didn't. So I don't know if I actually would have a younger self to say, you know, do this better or do that better, because I had to be the best at that moment. Someone else can chime in whatever they want.
Yeah, that is a tough question. I really can't think of anything other than having photographed him even more. They were just, you know, just having my camera with me at all times when we interacted, when we went out. The difficult thing with Prince is that he didn't want to be photographed all the time. You know, conditions had to be.
Did he make requests,
right
Afshin? Like, did he say, like, now's the time for photography, or like now's the time for not? Did he like did he have like boundaries around that?
Well, he did it with me.
I mean,
my wife. I couldn't get on the bus when I was on tour, because I think that was his home away from home. So there were some beautiful shots I think I missed because of that, but I couldn't do that. I could take anything else but that.
No, honestly.
The tour bus was home, so like no
Right.
pictures.
No pictures.
Yeah, he similarly, I did 3 tours with him, and there was nothing that we did on his tour bus image wise. And then in terms of off limits, it was, I mean, if we were planning a photo shoot, if we were doing a photo shoot for something, then obviously that's what we're there to do. All the other in between times, whether it was on tour or we were out, I would have my camera and I would kind of gauge the situation, and occasionally I'd pull it up. But if he didn't want me to take pictures for whatever reason, he would just kind of look over, and there was, you know, a silent communication between the two of us, and I knew, like, okay, chill right now. And sometimes he'd look over and be like, okay, why aren't you taking pictures? I'm hanging out with Sam Jackson, you know. So there was the opposite end of it too. But we were able to kind of communicate non-verbally, and I knew if it was okay or if it wasn't. And so the advice that I was saying is, I wish I would have taken more chances and just photographed him more in those quiet moments, and just let him tell me, no, let's not do it right now, versus me kind of self-editing to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Because I think, it's like Alan said, I missed some really kind of quiet, intimate moments that would have been really interesting.
Where of all you've captured, Sam?
I was going to say that I think the advice that has served me the most actually has been to be a problem solver. You know, part of that with the flow kind of vibe is also, you know, if he threw something at you, don't just be like, well, it's just impossible. You put some thought into it, and, you know, maybe it is impossible, but at least you thought about it and you considered it, and maybe you tried some avenues, and maybe something else happened. You know, that, again, going back to the cliche of like him saying, I want a camel at 3 a.m, that kind of thing. You know, if you really think about it, he's just asking, like, can I get a camel at 3 a.m? It's a question. And so you can answer it like, no, that's crazy. You can say, well, no, let me check. And you check, and no, you can't get a camel at 3 a.m, but you check. And why not? So I think it's part of that, you know, being a problem solver, not just going, no, I can't do that. And, you know, I think advice I would give my younger self differently is just to, I guess I would just try harder to do things that I wasn't familiar with, like photography, for instance. I think I mentioned before, you know, he did give me some opportunity to shoot some photos, and I didn't feel comfortable enough in it to really pursue it that much. I kind of was fine with my work in Photoshop. But that would have been an interesting experience if I'd actually put more effort into it.
Yeah, I mean, there is this element of like jumping into the dream. I mean, I mentioned going to Club Rio for 3121, and I remember waiting outside, like before I went in. I love Bentleys, and I remember seeing this baby blue Bentley, and I was like, oh my God. I remember telling my mom, like, look at this baby blue Bentley. It's beautiful. And I go up to the Bentley and I'm like looking in it and I see the symbol hanging from the rear view mirror. And at the same time, I see this very big security guard walking towards me. And I was like, tell Prince he has a very nice car. Right? I knew it was his car immediately. And like the stepping into arenas that you don't necessarily think that you belong in, but you have a desire for, there is a magic around that. And that's one of the big gifts I think Prince has definitely taught me. I've mentioned a few times that I'm an educator here in New York, and I'm constantly pushing against, it's like we're earlier with, you know, the foolishness that we dealt with the trolls. It's like I'm constantly pushing against what I know to be possible for children and within public education. And I give Prince a lot of credit around what I think around like how big can you be and expansive you can be around your thinking about what's possible in terms of not only what can be created, but what can your contribution be to this world. And, you know, and I really appreciate this conversation because it's so much of it has been around your creation of this brand and your creation of this marketing that has left us with who we know to be Prince as. So I really want to thank you as artists within your own right of bringing that contribution and being in contribution to an artist who people would think, oh, he's good. You know, he doesn't need more. No, he needed more. He needed some Sam Jennings. He needed some Allen Beaulieu. You know, he needed some Afshin Shahidi. You know, he needed some Troy Gua. He needed some of that to really help us understand who he is. And I really can't thank you enough for, you know, being in contribution to that state, because the more we create, the more is possible. And, you know, as artists, you know, you each, and I've been a Prince fan since, the good Lord, since I was the age of 9. At the age of 9, I discovered Prince due to my cousin Rachel, who as like, she's that cousin to me. And for everyone on the call, it's been, I'm sure everyone has their own version of the story, but I can look back at the imagery you created and the excitement you created, and thank you for memorializing your work in your books, and you know, Sam for, you know, revisiting One Night Alone. I remember being at Lincoln Center for that particular concert. So, you know, like all of these things truly matter. And, you know, in a world where we are post-Prince, it doesn't feel like post-Prince because it feels like he's very much still so with us. And it's artists like yourselves who, you know, keep that contribution going and keep that creativity alive. So I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight around that work. Robin, I don't know, I'll pass the mic over to you for any final words for our amazing guests.
Well, just, I wanted to say thank you so much for saying yes to me. It means a lot. As Mauri was saying, it's like, she definitely is someone who thinks big, and she's just like, I'm like, ooh, maybe I should ask Sam Jennings. Do it. Okay. He said yes. Maybe I should ask him if he'll ask Afshin to do it. Okay. He said yes too. So it was like, definitely, it's been such a fun experience putting this show together. Unfortunately, we had that little situation in the beginning, but I just want to really say thank you for being awesome, for joining us on this conversation, on being open to questions from our participants, because it really means a lot to them. Like Mauri has said this on previous shows, like we've attended some of these kind of things, and it's usually the host and the guest, and they just talk to each other. But I know that it also means a lot for the participants to be able to communicate with you, show their love to you, ask you questions. So I just want to thank you for being open to all of that and for joining us tonight. And just thanks everybody for being awesome and for signing on and staying with us.
Thank you, and it's good to see everybody. I wish I could meet everybody in person,
I wish we could too. That is another thing I wanted to say, actually. The reason why we're also doing these things is because we can't be all together in person yet because of this crazy virus in the world that we live in. So, and hopefully one day we could bring this to you in a situation where we could all be together and really like have a real face-to-face conversation. But we also feel like this situation for us Prince fans, it's a way for us to continue to connect with each other and share ideas and share thoughts and share love around Prince and music and the whole bit. So thank you all.
Well, thank you. And
Any final words from our guests? Any final words from our guests?
I love everybody. Have a great night. From Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
Thank you, Allen.
Thank you so much, Allen.
Minneapolis. Thank you guys for doing this and inviting us on, and really for just continuing his legacy. I think that's really important. And part of what I hope to do is to inspire some younger Prince fans to get to know him and listen to his music and dig into his artistry. Because there's so much transitional music happening right now that just kind of comes and goes, and Prince's music, I think, will be everlasting.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, just want to thank you for having me, and just reiterating what Afshin said. There's so much more to Prince. There's plenty of people who talk about the best bass solo he ever had and all that kind of thing, but I appreciate people who are interested in the visual side of what he was about, because I think we all agree that that was a really important part of who he was. And so, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that.
All right. Well, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. So wait, Robin, we want to do the sound off?
Okay, well, we're going to play a little game. Our guests are welcome to stay.
One last game.
If you guys want to pop off and do your thing, we know we've cut you for a really long time.
But thank you so much, Afshin. I know you said you had to go. Thank you so much, and all the best with your family, Afshin. You're very inspiring on Facebook, by the way. And my daughter, who is 7, loves Yara. So congratulations to you and your wife on just having a dynamic daughter. I know you have 2 sons as well who are beautiful. But as an educator, I am always inspired listening to her speak. And thank you. I look forward to keeping in touch with you as well.
Please.
Sam, thank you for the opening the door for Afshin to come on the show.
Thank
Alan,
you, Sam.
thank you for all you have done, because you have planted the seeds for us to grow from, Alan. So thank you. And Troy, thank you. He's gone, but he gets to still be thanked.
Yes.
For just being a constant inspiration. But Robin's gonna and we're gonna end off here with our sound off. So Robin, you know how this goes, Prince fam. Take care, everyone. Good night. We're gonna do a sound off. Robin, you want to lead us off into that?
Yes. So we decided that we're going to have you guys choose which is your favorite video. My Name is Prince, or whomever it may concern. So if you are all in on My Name is Prince, give us a thumbs up. If you are all in on To Whoever It May Concern, give us a clap. But do it while the video is going, and we're going to try to tally the votes and see who's the winner. So let me go and share my screen. We hope that you hang out with us, because after we wrap up, after we do the game, we're gonna wrap up and just announce our next show, which is gonna be really fun. We had a lot of fun choosing this particular topic for the next show. And then Kat's gonna play some music until I get sleepy. All right, so hang on. I'm gonna share my screen again. Let's see. Let me pull it up. Oops. Okay, here it is. Share my screen.
To remember are no kings on this earth, only princes. The new power generation, just taking control. Yeah. Sexy mother. Introducing my take. Tony M, Kirky J, and Dana D. Sonny T. Tell us where the party be. Yes. Yes. Tell me Barbarella likes it in the dark, but we like her. Tell me Barbarella likes it in the dark, but we like her. And she don't stop. I got 7 hours, baby. So what you wanna do? And she don't stop. Levi, Michael B, and me, we get funky. Damn the DJ. What's the name of this game? And she don't stop. Temptation, sweet so much, I should have died, my baby won't touch. Neither one of us shall you touch. Don't touch that radio. Don't touch that radio. Don't touch that. All seven men will watch them learn. If you try to stop us, we will burn. We will burn. If you try to stop us, we will burn. We will burn. What is sacrifice? What is sacrifice? Hold your text deacon. Hold your text deacon. Can't nobody stop. If they step, they drop. The funky new album entitled From Prince and the New Power Generation. On Paisley Park, Warner Brothers, CD, cassette, we out.
Alrighty, folks. Okay, so I'm gonna just put my vote in first. I just love To Whomever May Concern. It makes me want to go and
You can't get in shape because you don't have an hour to go do cardio every day.
Oh,
well,
oops.
Nobody has time
Okay, that's not a
I don't do an hour
hacker.
of
That's
cardio.
me
I
who
have
forgot to
never
turn
done
off
an hour of
the
cardio in the past
YouTube.
5-10 years, and I stay sub.
So what was it, Robin? The high five was My Name is Prince. You're on mute, Robin.
Yes, I muted myself because I forgot to turn off the YouTube and the ad started. I think the thumbs up was My Name is Prince, and the claps were To Whomever May Concern. Oh, okay, we're getting 1, 2, 3.
People love My Name is Prince.
5, 6, 7.
I see you, Yvette.
9. Oh.
You got the real thumbs up.
9, 10. Oh, you guys.
Right, My Name is Prince won that one.
Fine. I love To Whomever It May Concern.
So
it makes me want to go and listen to the I'm gonna go and listen to the Symbol album now because it just brought back so many memories. And I thought that track actually, even though it was a commercial, it was so funky. Like that is the ultimate branding. It's just like, to me, it's funkier than My Name is Prince.
It is, but My Name is Prince has its place. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Our next episode is entitled Come, Prince as Spirituality and Sex. In this episode, The Purple Paradigm, we will explore and navigate the intersection of spirituality and sexuality in the world of Prince. You know how we do. That's a big one. That's what he did. Right? That's a big one. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're welcome to hang out with us for a little bit more.
I'm going to need a bigger mug of wine for that conversation.
Yes, I think I'm gonna need a drink, in the words of Morris Day, for that one. Right? So please join us. Of course, it's going to be on October 7th at 7 o'clock. We always meet on the 7th of the month at 7 p.m. And DJ Razz Beret, you're welcome to take us out. We're going to hang out here for a little bit. Sam, you're the man. Thank you, Sam. Sam, you have been, like, you made this episode, Sam. You have been such a,
you did.
You have, like, helped us. You've been our lifeline in this episode.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. We hope to have you back.
Absolutely.
Because there's always more to talk about.
Thank you, everyone. I will say, thank you. I want to say one thing about Sam. Like, whenever I'm like, oh, Sam, I need this, he sends it. Him and Troy, like, it was a dream to work with you guys on this episode. You made everything just perfect and fun and smooth sailing.
Great.
So thanks so much
You're
for
welcome.
that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you for bringing Prince into the 21st century, because it's because of you. I know that the work that you guys did with MPG Music Club and actually, like that was really big, right? The exclusiveness of being able to buy tickets first and getting into sound checks and all that type of stuff. Thank you for being a part of that world, because it meant a lot to us as people who really love Prince. And I wish you continued success with all you have coming for you and your family, and God bless. Thank you so much for being with us on this journey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So DJ Razz Beret, the floor is yours. And fams, we'll see you next month on the 7th at 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you. Feel free to hang out and listen to music. I'm going to take a bathroom break and keep my computer on. I hope it's the same. Night.